happened on a quiet morning in South Lake Tahoe, May 27, 2024. A young bear, just a year old, barely 80 pounds, wandered into the wrong yard, and by the end of the day, it was dead. A man pulled the trigger. Authorities called it self-defense. Case closed. But what happened next changed everything. Because after the bear fell, the neighbors began to speak, and the story that unfolded wasn't the one the man had told. The homeowner said the bear entered through a closed door. He claimed he tried to scare it away, shouting, waving his arms, making noise. But the bear didn't run. Instead, it started moving toward his dog. Panicked, the man ran to his bedroom, grabbed a rifle, and fired. 2 shots. The bear ran, bleeding, and climbed a nearby tree, but didn't stay there long. It fell to the ground, wounded. The man walked outside and ended it with a 3rd shot. Game wardens arrived. They listened, reviewed the scene, and found the man had acted within the law. They ruled it self-defense. At first, it seemed like the end. But that same day, a neighbor made a phone call. They contacted the Bear League, a local wildlife conservation group, and told a very different story. According to the neighbor, the door wasn't shut. The bear hadn't fully entered the house, and worse, the homeowner had often spoken about hating bears and wanting to kill one. Another witness told the press they heard the first shot after the bear had already left the house. Suddenly, the narrative began to unravel. The Bear League went public. They posted photos of the bear online. One showed him alive, clinging to a tree, his face young, his frame small. People reacted fast. This wasn't self-defense. This was revenge. This was wrong. Online comments poured in. Some were heartbroken. Others were furious. Wildlife lovers said this bear didn't die because he was dangerous. He died because someone wanted him dead. But others stood by the man. They said he was in fear, that the bear had crossed a line when it entered the house and moved toward his dog. "You don't think," one supporter wrote. "You react. Anyone would have." It became more than a local story. And what happens when that line between wild and home disappears? The bear is gone now. The tree he climbed still stands. The house is still there. But South Lake Tahoe isn't the same. A young animal is dead. A man is scarred. And a community is left asking, what really happened that day? And what should happen next time? Because next time, it might not just be a bear that wanders too far. It might be us. What would you have done? Do you believe it was self-defense or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments. And if you care about stories that challenge what we think we know, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because behind every headline, there's a truth waiting to be uncovered. On November 13, 2024, in the mountain town of Arrow Bear Lake, California, a man fired 5 shots in his yard. By the time it was over, a black bear lay dead. The man said it was self-defense. Wildlife officials agreed. But the story didn't end there. Because some neighbors said the bear wasn't dangerous. Others called it murder. And once again, a small community was torn apart. Not just by what happened, but by what people believe should have happened. The bear wasn't a stranger. Locals had seen him many times, wandering the streets, sniffing around homes, slipping between pine trees. He was big, sure, but not aggressive. "If I opened the door, he'd run," one neighbor said. "Didn't stop, didn't growl, just took off." But for one homeowner, Chris, the story was different. He wasn't just watching the bear from a distance. He was living with it on his property, night after night, and the bear wasn't just passing through. Chris said he tried everything: electric fences, deterrents, bear spray. Nothing worked. The bear kept coming, breaking into his chicken coop, tearing through defenses, ignoring warnings. He even said the bear charged him once before. So when Chris saw the bear again that morning inside the coop attacking his livestock, he grabbed his rifle and fired. According to California Fish and Game Code 4181.1, if a bear is caught in the act of harming livestock, the owner is allowed to take immediate action. The Department of Fish and Wildlife ruled the shooting justified. "It wasn't illegal," an officer said. "He did what he had the right to do, but legal doesn't always mean accepted." Because that same day, the backlash began. Neighbors heard the shots, 3 or 4 at first, then another 2. Some were confused, others were angry. Online, the comments exploded. There had to be another way. This bear wasn't a threat. He just wanted food, not blood. Some residents stood by Chris. "I love animals too," one said, "but if Fish and Game says it's justified, then it's justified." Still, others couldn't shake the image of a bear shot dead near a coop. Not in self-defense from an attack, but while doing what wild animals do. So what really happened in Arrow Bear Lake? Was it protection, a last resort, or the result of fear pushed too far? Maybe all of it is true, maybe none of it is. But one thing is clear. The line between living with nature and fighting it is getting thinner every year. And when animals lose their fear of humans, humans tend to respond the only way they know how. What do you think? Was Chris protecting his home or crossing a line? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you care about real stories at the edge of wilderness and civilization, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because the wild isn't going away, and how we treat it says everything about us. In mid-October 2018, dark clouds loomed over Michalchuk's property in Bella Coola, British Columbia. He and his wife had just returned from a week-long trip, eager to reunite with their children and share stories of their travels. However, their homecoming came with unsettling news. During their absence, Michalchuk's in-laws, who had been caring for the children, reported a growing problem. Grizzly bears had moved into the yard. A mother bear and her 3 cubs had claimed the property as their own, causing increasing destruction. Drawn by the fruit trees, they would climb the branches, feast on the ripened fruit, dig through the earth in search of roots, and leave their droppings scattered across the yard. What had started as occasional visits had quickly turned into a dangerous situation. Spending time outdoors was becoming a challenge. The children were afraid, and despite their best efforts, Michalchuk's in-laws had been unable to drive the bears away. They had tried making loud noises, shaking a bucket filled with nuts and bolts, but the Grizzlies remained unfazed. These bears weren't just passing through, they were confident, territorial, and seemed to regard Michalchuk's family as intruders rather than the rightful occupants of the land. If they returned, something had to be done. Grizzly bears are among nature's most formidable predators. Powerful, fast, and incredibly tough. As one of the largest subspecies of brown bear, they are both resilient and fiercely protective of their young. While many people might find the idea of living in such close proximity to these animals unthinkable, in Bella Coola, British Columbia, grizzlies are a fact of life. The region is well known for frequent human-bear interactions. With its dense forests and abundant rivers, Bella Coola is a natural paradise for both people and wildlife. Tourists flock to the area for bear-watching tours and safaris, drawn by the opportunity to see these magnificent creatures up close. But some argue that this increased human presence has made the bears more brazen, less fearful of people than they should be. And as a result, encounters with aggressive grizzlies have become more common. Lawrence Michalchuk knew he couldn't allow this situation to escalate. A mother grizzly and her 3 cubs had essentially claimed his yard, and he feared a disaster was looming. His children were young, and his daughter was especially terrified, understandably so. She had already suffered a traumatic bear attack in the past, leaving her with a severe arm injury. Michalchuk couldn't shake the thought of history repeating itself. If a fully grown adult was no match for an enraged grizzly, what chance would a child have? At 54 years old, Lawrence Michalchuk knew his duty as a father and husband. He had to protect his family. If the bears returned, he wasn't going to let them take over his property again. As expected, the following morning, the grizzlies emerged once more. There was no denying their beauty, the way they moved, their sheer presence. But admiration didn't change the fact that they posed a threat. Michalchuk didn't want to harm them, but he needed to make them understand that this was not their home. Determined, he grabbed his shotgun, loaded with birdshot, and stepped outside. His wife and children remained inside, watching nervously from a window. His wife, sensing the weight of the moment, decided to film everything. Michalchuk wasn't looking for a fight. He wasn't trying to frighten his children either. He simply wanted to send a clear message to the bears. Standing beneath his front deck, his loyal dog by his side, he took a deep breath and fired his first shot into the air. The loud blast echoed through the yard. Ideally, that would be enough. The bears would get startled and run off. But things didn't go as planned. Rather than retreating, the mother grizzly locked eyes with him. She wasn't leaving without a challenge. In an instant, she charged straight at him. Panic surged through Michalchuk. Without hesitation, he turned and bolted for the house, barely making it inside. His heart pounded as he watched from the window. Eventually, the bear and her cubs seemed to lose interest and began moving away. Relief washed over him. Maybe they had finally understood. They weren't welcome here. Maybe this time, they were truly leaving for good. Still, he wanted to be sure. With the bears now at a distance, he decided to give them one final push. Once again, he stepped outside, shotgun at the ready. Another shot rang out into the air, meant to reinforce the warning. That turned out to be a mistake. The mother bear stopped in her tracks. Michalchuk shouted, hoping to scare her off once and for all. Another bad move. In an instant, the grizzly's ears flattened, her head pulled back, and her mouth opened. The sun glinted off them as she let out a deep, guttural roar. And then, she charged. This wasn't just a warning. This was a full-on attack. The mother grizzly was furious. She wasn't just defending her territory. She was protecting her young, just as fiercely as Michalchuk was trying to protect his own. This is bad. Really bad, Michalchuk thought, panic creeping in. I don't think I'm going to make it back to the house. But he had no choice. He had to try. His children were inside. He couldn't let this be the end. Then disaster nearly struck. His right shoe slipped off. For a split second, he stumbled, nearly losing his balance. He waited until the grizzly crossed the driveway. Then, in a split-second decision, he raised his shotgun, took aim at her right leg, and pulled the trigger. The shot connected. The bear collapsed onto the ground, stunned. Michalchuk didn't waste a single second. He turned and sprinted for his life, knowing he had only moments before the bear recovered. And he was right. Within seconds, the grizzly was back on her feet, her rage undiminished. She resumed the chase, her massive frame tearing across the yard. But by then, Michalchuk had already reached the door. He lunged inside, slamming it shut behind him. His chest heaved, his hands shook, but he was alive. From the safety of their home, the family watched as the mother bear finally turned away, gathering her cubs. Without another glance back, the four animals disappeared into the wilderness. Later, Michalchuk reported the incident to BC conservation officers. His wife, still shaken from the ordeal, decided to upload the footage to YouTube. Along with the video, Michalchuk shared his side of the story, unaware of the firestorm of controversy that was about to ignite. There was no blood, no fur left behind, and I know she'll be sore, but at least now she'll think twice before approaching humans, Michalchuk explained. I spoke with the local conservation officers, showed them the footage, and they assured me I was fully justified in protecting myself and my family. Honestly, I'm just grateful it was me out there and not my kids. However, once the video went public, it triggered a storm of backlash. Critics condemned his decision to fire at the bear, accusing him of unnecessary aggression. Michalchuk stood by his actions, insisting that he never intended to seriously harm the animal, hence his choice to use birdshot. "I didn't want to blind her by aiming for the face, so I targeted her right side instead, hoping to trip her up just long enough for me to escape," he explained. "That bear wasn't going to leave," he added. "In the end, maybe it all worked out for the best, because she's still alive, and so am I."